Tonight, we are pulling back the velvet curtain on the one woman who walked into Henry VIII's love life and walked out alive. Just imagine it. Love. You are raised in strict seclusion, trained to be modest, quiet, and obedient. You have never needed to flirt, never needed to perform, never needed to charm a man across a banquet table. And then, without warning, your face is sent across Europe in the form of a portrait to the most feared husband in England, a king already famous for discarding wives like yesterday's promises. Henry sees the painting and decides he wants you, not because he knows you, not because he understands you, but because the image flatters his fantasy. A new queen, a fresh start, a woman who will look at him and make him feel young, powerful, irresistible again. The treaty is signed, the marriage is set. Your fate is sealed by ink, wax, and men who will never have to lie in your bed. But then comes the moment that ruins everything, the first meeting. A single encounter where one misunderstanding bruises Henry's pride. And in his world, a bruised pride becomes a weapon. This is not just the story of a short, annulled marriage. This is the story of Anne of Cleves, the wife people call unlucky, but who may have been the luckiest of them all. And in a few minutes, you'll see why her rejection was not her tragedy. It was her escape hatch. Before you get comfortable, do the usual little ritual with me. Take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this kind of Tudor drama. Now tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what your local time is in the UK. And if it's late, dim the lights. Maybe put a fan on for that soft background hum. And let's slip into this story together. Slowly, Anne of Cleves was born on 22. September 1515 Zoll, Düsseldorf, into a world that looked comfortable from the outside, but felt narrow on the inside. Her childhood unfolded behind the thick walls of Berg Castle, surrounded by tapestries and polished wood and the quiet footsteps of servants. Yet her upbringing was disciplined. Even austere, her education was not the sparkling, courtly training you might imagine for a future queen. She learned to read and write in German, and she became skilled in domestic arts like needlework and weaving, patient crafts that reward silence. Even the faith in her household was split, like Europe itself. A father sympathetic to reform, curious about new ideas. A mother devoted to the old Catholic rites, Latin prayers, familiar tradition. Anne grew up learning how to live between two worlds without making noise about it. And that quiet ability to endure contradictions, to stay calm when the room is tense, will matter more than anyone could have predicted. When Anne was only 11, her father arranged a childhood betrothal to a boy in the rain. It was the sort of political promise made between families, not between hearts. The children were too young. The world changed, and by 1535 the arrangement faded away like a forgotten letter. Anne likely thought it was gone forever, but in Henry VIII's England, old paperwork has a nasty habit of returning at exactly the moment a king wants a way out. By the late 1532, Henry's court was trembling with anxiety. Jane Seymour had died after giving him a son, and Henry, aging and often ill, needed alliances. Catholic Europe was hostile. His ministers looked toward Protestant states in the Holy Roman Empire, and Cleves suddenly became valuable. So in 1539, English envoys arrived in Düsseldorf to negotiate for a bride. They expected courtly glamour. Instead, they found a household ruled by Anne's brother, William, a man so strict about female propriety that he bristled at the idea of men simply looking at his sisters. The ambassadors wanted to judge Anne's appearance. William basically snapped. Would you have them stand naked before you? And honestly, can you blame him? Henry's reputation was already toxic. The kind of husband who could love you loudly, then destroy you publicly. Still, politics pushed them forward, and soon one brushstroke would decide Anne's fate. Because Henry did not fall for Anne the woman, he fell for Anne the portrait. Thomas Cromwell, Henry's chief minister, he sold the match like a desperate man selling a dream. He praised Anne's modesty, her virtue, her gentleness, the kind of qualities that sounded safe for a king tired of conflict. And to calm Henry's nerves, they called on Hans Holbein the younger to paint her. Holbein understood what was at stake. A portrait could lift a woman onto a throne or place her in the path of disaster. When the painting reached England, Henry was delighted. He stared at the calm face, the folded hands, the composed expression, and decided this was the woman he wanted. He could imagine her admiring him. He could imagine himself as the triumphant bridegroom again. The treaty was signed on 4 September 1539, and preparations began. Anne, meanwhile, continued her quiet routines in Germany, likely unaware that her life had already been rearranged by strangers. Then came the journey. Winter roads, ceremonies at every stop, cold winds, foreign faces. Anne crossed into England at the end of December 1539 and rested at Rochester, believing she still had time to learn the rules of this new world. But Henry could never wait. On 1 January 1540, he decided to visit her in secret. Dressed as a messenger, playing a romantic game he thought all women should understand. He walked into her chamber, and the entire marriage began to unravel in one breath. Anne was seated by a window when the door opened, and a broad, ruddy man strode in, unannounced. He carried a gift, and before she could fully understand what was happening, he grabbed her and kissed her. Anne did not speak English yet. She did not know the custom. She had been raised to strict modesty and careful distance. To her, this was not romance. It felt like intrusion. She recoiled, frightened, and turned away. Henry's pride took the hit instantly. In his mind, the scene was meant to flatter him, a secret test where the bride recognizes her king by love alone. Instead, she treated him like a stranger who had crossed a line. He left in fury, then returned in full royal splendor. Anne, mortified, knelt and tried to recover the moment. They dined through interpreters. Polite smiles stretched over awkward silence. But the damage was done. The king had not been adored. He had been rejected first. Within hours, Henry told his courtiers, "I like her not." And everyone, absolutely everyone, followed his lead. The court that had praised her became a court that criticized her. Yet politically, Henry was trapped. The alliance mattered. So the wedding went ahead on 6 January 1540. And the next morning, Henry began building his escape story, insisting the marriage was not consummated, repeating complaints designed to protect his ego. Anne, meanwhile, said something that still chills me. When asked what happened at night, she answered, softly, that he kissed her, took her by the hand, and said good night, and in the morning, farewell. Nothing more. And that quiet simplicity told the truth. Anne understood what other women learned too late. Henry VIII was not a man you embarrassed. If he felt mocked, he could turn it into cruelty. So she did not fight. She did not demand She did not cry loudly in public. She stayed composed, smiled when spoken to, and made herself harmless. In that court, harmless often meant safe, but safe does not mean secure. And by late June 1540, the familiar pattern began. She was ordered away from court to Richmond Palace under the excuse of plague. Distance first, undoing second, then, in the night of 6 July, royal commissioners arrived at her door. Imagine waking to that knocking. Love, half asleep, heart racing, mind flashing, with images of Catherine of Aragon's exile and Anne Boleyn's blood, and fainted. When she came to, they reassured her. The king wished only to examine the legality of the marriage. And suddenly that childhood betrothal to Lorraine came back like a ghost dragged into candlelight. This was Anne's moment of truth. She could resist and risk everything, or she could step aside and survive. So she chose the smartest form of bravery surrender with dignity. She agreed to the annulment, and in return, Henry rewarded her with a settlement so generous it shocked the court, an income of about £4,000 a year. Estates, jewels, and a new title, the king's beloved sister. She ranked above every woman except the future queen and Henry's daughters. She was no longer a wife trapped in his bed. She became family, protected by ceremony and convenience. And here is the delicious twist. The man who engineered her marriage, Cromwell, paid for the disaster with his head. While Henry rushed toward Catherine Howard, Anne quietly stepped into wealth and freedom. Next, we follow what happens when the rejected wife becomes the safest woman in England, and how she quietly watches the next tragedies unfold. What most people miss is this. Henry did not reject Anne because she was ugly. He rejected her because she did not play the role he needed. By 1540, Henry was no longer the golden prince of the early Tudor court. He was heavier, in pine, and haunted by his own reputation. What he craved was not simply beauty, but reassurance. He wanted a woman who would look at him like he was still irresistible, still heroic, still worth the danger. And Anne, poor Anne, arrived from a world where women were trained to be modest and contained, not sparkling and flirtatious. She did not speak English. She did not know the English court's performance of romance. So when Henry burst into her chamber in disguise, expecting a swoon and a giggle, Anne gave him the worst thing possible, honesty. Not rude honesty, not cruel honesty, just instinct. She recoiled because any woman raised as she was would recoil. For Henry, that reaction did something deeper than disappointment. It humiliated him. And once Henry felt humiliated, he turned cold. He began rewriting the story in his head so that he was not the rejected one. She was. That is the real reason the marriage failed at the first meeting. Not her face, not her body, but his wounded pride